Hi everyone, it's Natalie. Welcome to my channel. Um, so today I have a little story to tell. The truth is I do not have 5 decks that I've worked with over the last decade. So actually coming back to what I would be doing in 2019, which I've already done, um, that's really what I got, right? The top 5 for 2019 is what I've got. Because although I've been working with tarot since I was 19, I'm 44 now, so that's 25 years, um, there was a very long gap where I was away from the tarot and doing other things. And yet, I found that during that time period, the tarot never left me, even though I may have left it. It was still very, very much part of what I was doing. It was very much part of what was inside of me. What was churning away, what was forming my reality and helping me understand it, because the images don't go away, especially if you're working with a Smith-Waite based deck. And for the prior 15 years, the Smith-Waite system and deck was really my primary source of work with the tarot. Not that the Marseille was not, because I was still working with Marseille and Pip style decks. Actually, I've always like a Marseille or it was like a Visconti Sforza type deck, and I can't remember, and I think it's a Llewellyn deck, and I don't remember the name of it. But anyway, I was always working with one of those as well. But the images that really would stick were the ones that were illustrative, right? So I'd like to tell you the story of what I was doing with the tarot during that 10 years that I was not actively and intentionally working with it or working as a tarot reader. So here we go. So once upon a time, I lived in London, and I was there for 10 years. And after 10 years, I had worked very, very, very hard and decided I needed to take a journey and start my life over again. So I took all of the years of hard work, building my craft, growing the way that I was working with theater, with movement, with my teaching practice, and hopefully with a directing practice that I was having trouble establishing over there. I wanted something better. I wanted better prospects. Surely there had to be a better way to do things. There would be somebody who was able to take what I had to offer and find it valuable and give me the opportunity to direct and work with people in that way and so forth. So after building a plan and thinking it through very carefully, I realized it was time to take action. So I spun the wheel and took some risks, because what I wanted was satisfaction. I was chasing after satisfaction. I really, really wanted to have a job where I could be in one place all the time and contribute to them and have something to show for it, and to feel just deeply fulfilled and capable, and like everything. You know, I had all my trophies on the shelf behind me to show, and all I would have to do is show up and be there and be fabulous, and it would all work. Because at that point, I was 32 and really struggling to establish myself in London beyond where I'd already been. And at that time, I still had ambition, which I really have lost. I don't really chase after ambition so much anymore, as I just, you'll see. So yes, I was still very, very much convinced that I wanted to be the Nine of Cups. And I had a Knight of Cups. I had a beautiful fiance who was tall and dark and handsome and romantically inclined, and he was very happy to move with me to the States. He wanted, in fact, to be in the States. And we got engaged, right? I proposed to him, actually. And so, you know, we had this wonderful potential for partnership, and I really, really was hoping, right, that we could move back to the States, start a family, live happily ever after, grow old together, buy a house, you know, have all the stuff, do all the things, have the great career, the work, the life, all of it, right? And I really wanted to, you know, I was very egotistically driven at that point, and I wanted to establish my own kingdom, right? I wanted that creative space. And I wanted to be in charge of it. I wanted to have a foothold in the world. I wanted to take that, my wand or my staff and, clank the floor with it and be like, this is where I stand or sit. This is my kingdom, right? So with that desire, I decided I was going to manifest exactly what I wanted. So I put it out there in the world. I sent out tons and tons of resumes, and ta-da, it came true, right? I waved my magic wand and pulled all my elements together, and I was awarded a wonderful faculty position that was highly desired by a lot of people at a major university in Chicago that's known for their theater school. And I moved there. I packed everything up and I took a big shift. It was very hard to pull all my, to get the chariot put together and get all of the animals moving in the right direction. But I did eventually. And I made a victorious return back to the States and kind of rode back through, kind of like, look at this, you people. I went away for a while and now I'm back and everything's going to be great and rah, rah, rah. Unfortunately, my Knight of Cups became very, very suspicious. He really felt he didn't trust this new culture. He didn't trust the Americans. They weren't familiar. It gave him terrible anxiety. It was also during the 2008 election. And he was a scholar and studied things, and he couldn't believe that it would be possible for Obama to win the election. And he angsted over it, and he worried about it, and he was frustrated about the situation we were in. And so he packed up all of his stuff in this state of being burdened and feeling too heavy and like the world was too much. And he took all of his toys and he went back home. Went right back home to England where he felt he would be safe again and where everything felt like it was familiar and he wasn't going to be challenged too much, and left me horribly, horribly wounded and a little bit heartbroken and full of grief and fear. However, all was not lost. I was still feeling very, very resilient. I had walked through that portal, moved to a new place, and I was ready to celebrate. I was ready to find a way to live my life and be happy. So I worked even harder. I worked even harder at finding the right person, at perfecting myself, at making myself beautiful enough, worthy enough of love, that somebody might actually want me. So I was convinced they wouldn't. I wanted to be a goddess. I wanted to be somebody that was completely desired. I was dependent on the idea that I could become the empress, that I could hold the key to everything for someone else. And that's because I had a lot of darkness and unresolved stuff happening in my subconscious that I had never worked through, processed, taken on board, nothing. I hadn't done any of my own personal work, none of it. So from that place of not having awareness, of having a lot of creepy crawly things there underneath that were unexamined, I became even more determined than ever to find the soulmate, to find the perfect person to be with. No longer was the Knight of Cups any good, not useful. Hell no. I needed someone who had some real strength, someone who had some authority, somebody who had some goals in his life, somebody who could really lay down the law, someone who could be an emperor to my empress. And so I found someone who presented himself as being the ultimate collaborator, the ultimate builder, somebody who really, really wanted to work with other people and wanted to find a way to build a life with me. And in a state of, being overcome by bondage patterns. Where did they go? By being overcome by patterns of bondage, by ideas about certain things and about what I needed to do. And without ever having examined a lot of my own stuff, I believed that I was being placed in a position where I was going to have it all because this guy was going to be perfect. He was going to be it. He was the emperor I was looking for. Right? So, from that place, as the emperor I was looking for, I had everything. I had it all. I was all in my own little garden, and I was so protected that I was virtually hoodwinked into believing that everything was perfect because he would tell me that it was. You know, you have everything that you want. And everything that you think that you want is right here. It's perfect. Everything is perfect. You know, and at one point he would say that things were great and they were wonderful and things between us were wonderful, and the next minute they were not. And then it would come back around, and it would go back through, and it would come back around. And over and over and over again, back and forth, it went to the point where I couldn't really decide what was going on. Because I'd been so infatuated in my little garden and so blinded by all of the things that I thought were there, things that I thought I really wanted, that I really couldn't see what was happening. And I became really immobilized, became blind, unable to see what was happening, because he wanted me all to himself. He wanted me there. He wanted to keep an eye on me. He wanted to make sure I never got out of his sight. Many things in my life started to fall away during that time because he had control of all of it, right? He even had control of my mind. He started to rush in and look at all of the things that I was interested in spiritually. He knew that I was into tarot cards and tarot reading. He knew that I was into mediumship at that point. He knew that all of that was happening, and little by little, he began to chip away at it, right? And take away things that I thought I really needed or wanted or believed. And he would really diminish their importance. Like, they're really not that bad. I don't know why you're back there crying so hard, right? Everything's right here. It's just that you don't need these 2 swords, and I can hold the other 3. They're not really that important. It's just thoughts. It's just ideas. And the longer it went on, the more imprisoned I began to feel, and the more my reality didn't feel like it was under my control. Because you see, when somebody is constantly questioning your reality, and then they begin to tell you, maybe you're the one that's messed up. Maybe you don't really know what your reality is. Maybe your reality is a prison of mental illness that you didn't realize was yours, you know, or that was there. We should really get you checked out, right? And so I began to reject everything in my life that had anything to do with spirituality or emotion or intuition, because it just got me in trouble. It just kept getting me in trouble over and over and over again. So I let it go. I stopped listening to my intuition. I stopped working with my cards. In fact, I started to hide them. I put them away, and eventually I locked them up, because if I even so much as had them somewhere, you know, anywhere where he could find them or accidentally come across them, there would be conflict. And it was that way with anything in my life he didn't approve of. So all of that had to go away, because by that point, he wasn't just the emperor. He had become the Hierophant as well. So he wasn't just ruling over the kingdom of my household or my life. He was ruling over the kingdom of my mind, of my spirit, of my soul. And he was absolutely determined to take control of it, which completely flipped my entire view of everything I thought I knew. Everything I thought I knew or understood was turned upside down. Everything. Because if you're not trusting your intuition anymore, and you're not able to trust your gut, and the person that's with you is starting to tell you that you might be sick, that maybe what you think is spiritual insight is actually mental illness, you begin to question everything in your reality, and it flips. And I was left in a state of utter bereftness. I had no ability to see that everything I wanted was still there and I could still have access to it because I was blinded and I was impoverished. I was spiritually impoverished, and eventually I was also materially impoverished because he took all of my money. He found ways of tricking it out of me and taking it from me. And it resulted in what I would refer to as the biggest tower moment of my life so far, where everything I had believed in, everything I understood, everything I knew was gone. All of it was gone. I had no idea what was right, what was wrong, what was up, what was down. The structures that I had built my entire life around were suddenly toppled completely. And I lost everything at one point. Everything. Once again, in a place of utter bereftness. And in fact, at a point where there was nothing left that could be taken from me anymore. It was all done. And it really did feel like the Ten of Swords, like being stabbed in the back by life, by this crazy partner, by all of it. However, all was not lost. I woke up. I had a sudden moment of realization that this was a terrible circumstance that I could not live in, and I did everything possible to get out of it right away and find a way to be safe and to get to some place where I would be okay, where my thoughts were my own, where I could reclaim myself, because everything that I had ever wanted in my life was gone. Everything I had ever hoped for. I was 34 years old. And everything that I wanted for my life no longer held any purpose. None of it did. The money, the job, spirituality, relationships, having a family, having a baby, being, not if I wanted to have a baby, because I did not want. Where did you go, devil? I did not want to perpetuate this pattern and that way of being. So I knew that I had to take all of this and find a way to understand it and resolve it, right? So what did I do? I took the 2 cups that were left. I crossed that bridge and realized I was still bereft. I was not satisfied with my work either. So all of the things that had once given me satisfaction no longer did. None of it was worth anything, right? So even the job wasn't worth anything anymore. There's all kinds of reasons for that. I watched my life die. I watched all of the goals I'd had, all of the aspirations, all of the purpose, all of the intent, all of the identity. All of the things I believed that I was suddenly died. The horse came through and trampled all of them. And I realized that in order to find a way to live, if I was still alive, because by that point I wasn't entirely sure, that I was going to have to find my own inner light. And the only way to do that was to be alone and away from life, away from things that were familiar. And rather than seeking that space by myself, because I didn't have the strength, I found a new teacher, I found a new tradition, a new hierophant. In this form, it was the Buddhist temple. So I went and joined the Buddhists, the Korean Zen, the Korean Zen Buddhists specifically, and I began seminary. And it was a very exoteric tradition, right? This is very exoteric. This is authoritarian. I say, you do, and there's no mysticism. There's no discovery to be made. Any awakening that you might have is possibly just a delusion anyway. So just come back to the present moment. But you know what? That was exactly what I needed. That was exactly what I needed. I needed for my mind to be able to rest. Rest in peace, rest in silence. And so I stayed in that silence, I stayed in that peace, and I restored balance, because balance and temperance and the ability to alchemically change myself back into something that I could recognize or that I could work with again, where I felt safe so that I could feel protected, but not so much from that guardian angel, so much as finding that guardian angel inside myself. That was what I needed. So I became an apprentice of sorts, and I wanted to become a novice monastic. So I took vows and made sure that I could do that, and I worked harder than I ever had at my own cultivation this time. Not at a job, not at work, not at approval from others, but at my own realization. And it worked. So, long story short, eventually, I should have planned this better. Eventually, come on, friends. There we go. Eventually, I found the guiding light, that guiding star, that ability to move out of that darkness and to begin to trust myself again. And it took a long time, but it was worth it. So through that whole time period, even though I wasn't working with the tarot, these images were completely with me. Because when you sit on a meditation mat, you only have your own mind. You only have your own mind. And the entertainment and really just kind of trash, a lot of it is just trash. Things that you've picked up through life and it cycles through everything. You see everything, all of the images, the beliefs, the various things that your brain is assimilated or not assimilated or stored somewhere, they all come to the surface. And for me, the tarot was definitely one of them, because these images were so deeply ingrained in my psyche and so much a part of who I was. And so it's funny, because when I started stitching and sewing and working and creating artwork, which was part of that recovery, it was part of this, definitely part of this. What began to happen was I was in love with the Fool. I became in love with the journey. And that journey is one that led me back to wholeness again. And back to a space where the last sort of 18 months, that were, or maybe it wasn't quite that long. It was a big part of 2019 and definitely a huge part of 2018, where, things were really uncertain and really difficult. It made coming back to just being the Fool and finding a way to cope much more possible. Much, much more possible. So yeah, that's what I did for that 10-year period. I was convinced that I really had to put the esoteric to one side and avoid it in favor of just reality, just three-dimensional material reality. The thing is, and I should maybe talk about this in another video, who knows, but the thing is that doesn't work, because my reality isn't that, right? As soon as I realized that my birth card, which I did at the beginning of last year, is the High Priestess. As soon as I realized that, I thought, oh, I've spent way too long trying to fit into, as a square peg trying to fit into a round hole that wasn't mine to begin with. So being able to embrace that part of myself and recognize that is part of who I am. And that is part of my journey. And no, I can't let a Hierophant or Emperor in the form of a religion or a person or the person running a religion, because the Eight of Cups has been my theme card for religion. The Eight of Cups, walking away again and again and again from religious environments because of I can't. I'm not going to be controlled by someone else. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm willing to learn. I'm definitely willing to learn. I'm definitely willing to examine and self-examine, take responsibility for my mistakes. Humility and humbleness are definitely a big part of that journey naturally, if you're on it, if you're really on it. But what I'm not willing to do is give up my independence. I'm not willing to give up who I am and what I am in favor of fitting a mold. So that's been my journey in the last 10 years with the tarot, and it's been a very indirect one. It's kind of like the tarot was what then, I don't know where I put my moon, but the tarot became, is my moon in here? Well, wherever it is in this deck that's now all over the place, but the moon became where the tarot was living in my body, or could represent how it was living. It was part of my unconscious. It was almost like a guide that was always there going, oh, you know what? That's what this moment, it's this. It's really this. This little moment where we're all here on retreat playing and running around and acting like idiots and so forth. It's kind of this a little bit. And it's delightful. Everything's taken care of. Everything's where we need it to be. We can just exist and be taken care of and be fulfilled, right? Or different moments, especially as a Buddhist, the begging bowl, being willing to accept help, being willing to accept generosity was a big part of that. And a big lesson that was a part of it, you can't do everything alone. You can't be everything to everyone. Sometimes you are in the position to be the guy with the money, and sometimes you really are the person that needs to accept and receive assistance or help or support. So it was an incredible time this last decade. It was an incredible time. And I'm deeply grateful for that experience, and I wouldn't wish it on anybody. Really wouldn't wish it on anybody. And yet, if you have the great fortune and misfortune to have your life overturned in such a way that you can't face reality. I mean, I'm touching the surface of it. I'm able to laugh about it. But the reason that I'm here, the reason that I'm doing this instead of day 4. Is that right? Day 4? Yes, today's the 4th. Is because of that journey. It's because of that journey. And even though I did end up having to go back to theater, because I had to make a living. I left the Buddhists, and I left the place I was, and I went back to the world and had to make a living, and theater was how I made my living. I came back to it from a completely different place, and it was the most beautiful. It was very like this. It was very 6 of Cups for a long, long time until it wasn't. And because education has become so involved in becoming like a money-making thing, it wasn't possible to stay being an educator in that environment because, well, there were so many reasons why it was not possible to remain an educator in a theater program in a university. Let's just put it that way. Not least of which it started to challenge my integrity, because how do I stay in a for-profit education model training people to do a job that isn't going to help them pay that debt off? Right? How do I live with myself doing that? And yet I miss it, because I know that the students that I trained, they're scrappy. They're scrappy. They can't be underestimated. And they will find a way. They'll find a way forward. I know they will. And I do miss it. Sometimes I do really miss it. And yet when I've had friends call up and say, do you want, there's this opportunity at this next university, do you want to do it? It's not where I belong anymore. It's just not where I belong anymore. And I have come to recognize and realize that. And it's okay. So now I'm here, and now I'm doing this, and now I'm on a different journey, and it will have a very different outcome. And won't that be exciting? Won't that be exciting to see? So yeah, if you made it this far, boy, you're doing well. So thank you so much for being here and sharing this journey with me if you did get here. And I'll hopefully speak with you all very, very soon. I certainly wish you all the best, and I'm so grateful to be here with you. Yeah. Bye.